Start!
Nice. Hello everyone, welcome to Women in STEM. You might be wondering, what does STEM stand for? And I'm wondering the same. So let's get started. Talking about Hill House, the haunting of Hill House, in fact. In this recording session, just the first 5 episodes. So
yes, which
now
are
we're all up to speed.
the episodes focusing on each of the 5 siblings. And only 2 of them have names that begin with letters from STEM.
That's true.
3, I guess, but we don't have 2 S's.
4 of them do. Steve, Shirley, Theo, Eleanor. Whatever, dude.
STEM. Yeah.
Steminal. Stone.
Yeah.
Stemone.
It's tricky.
Yeah. This is the hardest part of our job, by the way.
Yes.
Every single time.
Without fail. Because part of it is like, we mostly just don't remember that we're supposed to do that.
Until we have
So then
already
we sit
started
down,
recording.
and he presses record, and I say, oh gosh. Once again.
Yeah, and the funny thing is we've created this hurdle for ourselves. No one told us we needed to do
we
this.
easily could have just picked a different name for the podcast, and then this wouldn't be an issue at all.
We could have just called it Women in STEM, just across the board, and just not had to worry about the acronym. But here we are.
That's true.
You know what? We're committed to this particular bit. We're not backing down. We're not changing our minds. We said, okay, we shouldn't have done this, but we have, and now we're here, and we're gonna do it without fault. Every week.
Yes.
And that's a promise. Or your money back.
Women in STEM.
From real doctors you can trust.
Anyway, we can just come back to that. But we watched the first 5 episodes out of 10 of this. Yeah, and each one of them, these episodes is talking about the first, or the same, like, essentially 24 hours of their lives, but with, like, from the perspective of each child from oldest to youngest. So let's talk about that. I mean,
no,
I didn't say
no.
that.
Rhett,
Sorry.
Link, we're so sorry. This doesn't. We don't mean
It's
for
just
this to
that
keep
it's
happening.
a phrase. Like, I don't mean it to.
Yeah.
No disrespect.
No,
You know?
we would never try to infringe on your intellectual property.
No.
Like,
yeah. Because copyright is real and intellectual property exists. Anyway, no, just kidding.
Okay, so
Let's just jump in with episode 1, I think.
here's what I have so far. I have siblings, trauma, mansion.
Okay. That's pretty good.
I have eek in my head, but we've already
It's
done that
we
one.
did.
Yeah,
Eek
we've
monsters.
just
Eek mansion. Whatever. I really just think we're not going to talk about anything from the show if we just keep trying to figure this out. It's a dragonfly.
Big, beautiful one. Hello. Wow. And bright blue. Did you see that?
Yeah.
What a lovely friend.
Yeah.
Why don't we do everything outside?
Because sometimes we can't.
Yeah, it's true.
But anytime you can, you should.
Yeah,
And I've always said that.
that's true. Yeah.
So, you were saying something, though.
I'm sure it wasn't anything important.
Okay. So, episode 1, it's Steve, because he's the oldest. And it's also the only episode that I took notes on.
We could do episodes 1 through 5, mansion.
True.
That's
There
it.
it is.
We've done it.
And that was easy. No stress. It's like we just barely started recording and there's nothing wrong with us. Anyway, episode 1. One thing that I noticed that we kind of talked about is like, there's a scene when they're kids and the dad is going to check on them in the night, you know, as often happens in the show. And he like goes into the one kid's room and then across the hallway to the other kid's room, and then when he comes back out he like turns around again to go into the other rooms. And so it just really sets up this idea that like you don't really know the layout of the house, because you think he was just in that part of the hallway, but he's going this way. But it seems like he's just going back and forth between the rooms, and every time he opens the door there's a different kid in there.
Yeah.
So that's a really great, like, almost like foreshadowing, I don't know, just a really nice, like, moment that you're like, wait, hang on, what side of the hallway are we looking at? And it kind of leads into this idea that the house, like, doesn't really have an exact, like, structure or layout that you know for sure, and it's different for every person.
Mm-hmm.
Not just in their interpretation, like in their young child minds, but like maybe in reality, the house is actually changing its structure for each person.
And it kind of shows that a little bit in the title sequence. There's a scene where it shows one of the statues in the hallway, and then it, you know, pans back out, and you see the whole house depicted as a maze, and they change back and forth. It really is brilliant, because like the whole time you're watching the show, you cannot get a sense of where you are. You're either in one of the bedrooms, which you kind of have a vague idea where they are in relation to each other. You're in the kitchen maybe, or in the front entryway, but again, you have no idea where these things connect to each other.
Right.
And then there's an episode later on that we're not going to talk about, but that really exhibits that in a like show-stopping way. It's incredible. But
so it's nice to just get these little pieces like through each episode. I feel like especially in the first and fifth episode, you kind of see that idea of like not knowing where the rooms actually are, or like what's real and what's imagined or exaggerated.
In the first episode, because you think, oh, because I'm not familiar with it yet, you know, this first episode of the show, I'm, you know, eventually it'll make more sense, and then by the fifth episode you realize, no, it sure won't. In fact, it's getting worse. More confusion the longer I'm going.
It just seems like all these rooms are like not even attached to each other.
And this is, I should also point out that this is something that you noticed that wasn't, I didn't point this out at all, because I am perpetually lost anyway, and so I never have a concept of where I am. So I was like, I don't know where we are in the house on episode 10. Like, whatever, this is normal.
It's just because, like, you can kind of figure, like, the part that looks like a really old-timey castle is where the library is, because in the inside, when they're in the scenes, you see the spiral staircase and the, like, stained glass windows that don't look like anywhere else in the house. But it's like, why is it made like that? Why does the house have, like, one wing that's, like, way older, at least in style, than the rest of the building? So interesting.
I'm fascinated by Shirley. I think, and we've talked about none of the characters being very sympathetic, but I think of all of them, Shirley is the least sympathetic, at least to me. She is very frustrating, because it's, everything about her is very blunt and very, like, it has to be just so, and she is of the mindset that she can fix problems by just covering them up and making them look all right, you know? Like, to her, things are the way they look. And so if this dead person is, you know, has their hair and their teeth and their makeup done nice and the clothes, that they're not dead anymore, and that's gonna erase the trauma of them having died, and this kid maybe seeing her ghost on the foot of his bed, you know? And that's not how it works. You can dress up and I love that they address this in one of the later episodes as well, and this is one of my favorite, like, when a character is forced to confront themselves. This is my favorite one. I think about this one all the time, is when Memory, like, starts to break down Shirley's rationalizations for making things look the way they are supposed to be. And that's just, it's devastating, because it's everything she's built her life around, is making things look like the way that they should be. Her marriage, her business, her family relationships, even Nell's wedding. Luke wanted to be there. Nellie wanted him there so badly, but he showed up wearing dress clothes.
He was wearing a suit.
But he was high. And Shirley said, "You're not welcome here," even though Nellie would have had him there in a heartbeat and wanted him there, actively wanted him there, because it wouldn't have fit the image of Nellie's perfect wedding. Shirley wanted her to have a perfect wedding.
And the perfect wedding couldn't involve Luke, who's an addict. Which they're all so mean to him about.
They're supportive until it gets inconvenient. She's like, can't you just decorate it to look like Devilman?
Right.
And he's like, can't I just have a mask that is Daredevil? And she's like, you have to do it yourself. You have to make it
Yeah,
look into what
she's
it's...
fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay.
She didn't believe her parents when they said the kitten was dead. She didn't believe Steve when he said Mel was dead. Like, what a freaking lady.
Doesn't believe.
What I was saying yesterday, what's wrong with her is infinitely more interesting than what's wrong with anyone else. It's such an interesting development. You know, she already had kind of a traumatic view of death with losing all 5 of her kittens.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, the next week, her mother dies in a very violent way.
Mm-hmm.
I did a book report on Art Spiegelman's Mouse a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I've told you about this, but a lot throughout the graphic novel, he calls back to his own dishonesty and his poor relationship with his father and his own flaws. And, you know, the more he points out how dishonest he is and how he lies about the stories he's gonna include and how he's gonna depict certain things, the more he does this, the more dishonest that would make him seem, and the more untrustworthy. But it does the opposite. It makes him seem much more trustworthy and much more reliable because he is so upfront about his flaws.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's the same way with Shirley. Like, she is an unsympathetic character, but also it feels like a very real depiction of a person. It really is beautifully well made. Yeah. I'm just gonna finish this really quick.
Okay. One thing that you were talking about in terms of building up suspense and letting us really just sit with the characters is they have a lot of like long shots.
Oh my
without
gosh,
a lot of jumps.
Mikey Flanagan.
And there's a lot of monologue. Even like in the first, like we open up with Steve interviewing the lady about her husband who passed.
Mm-hmm.
And she just tells her story, and there's like a very slow zoom onto her, and he just sits there and she's just talking, and then you see this over and over, like in every episode.
Mm-hmm.
There's at least one character who will just talk.
Yeah, and
for like 2 minutes.
Very, very slow
And you
zoom.
just have to sit there and look at them.
Yeah.
And nobody else is interrupting or saying anything.
Mm-mm.
So it's it's something that you just really have to sit with. And it's something that like later on in one of the later episodes, they have like a really long pan shot for like, what is it, like 20 minutes?
20 minutes. The whole episode is made to look like it's done in one shot, and the takes are
The takes are
insane.
super long. Yeah.
That episode, the first time I saw it, I was already really invested in the show, but by the time I got to that point, I was literally frothing at the mouth. I was like, oh my... like, no one has done that. It was incredible. Visually, it was just because you don't notice it right away. But then you start to think, when's the last time they had it cut?
Yeah.
And then you realize it must have been 10 minutes because it's been 10 minutes since I've noticed and we haven't had one.
Yeah.
And then the ones that they do have are so fluid that it fits perfectly with the flow of the episode, especially in, I think it's episode like 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. It's whatever.
Yeah, we'll watch it probably today.
Probably. But anyway, even like in the first 5 episodes before they have the like really long pan, you can tell that like they're really taking their time and holding on these shots, and not, again, it helps to it not just be like jump scary, and you really feel more present and involved in the story. But yeah, it's just like they have a really interesting techniques, and it adds a lot of like involvement in watching.
An interesting thing too, kind of going back to the senses, is that a lot of times they intercut the children with the adults by showing like them in a similar situation. So for Theo, a lot of her episodes are her like holding an apple or her opening the fridge. It's her like her tactile experience, her touching different things. But for Shirley, it's visual. It's you know, her seeing the box, and she flashes back to the kitten that she had to bury, and like all these other things. Like and the way that they intercut these scenes and these similarities, it makes it feel like it's happening concurrently, which is a fascinating way to watch the show, that you feel like you're watching them as a child but also as an adult, and these things are happening at the same time. You know, and that's an interesting way to feel about it, because obviously one is happening because of the other, but
it does feel at the same time, and it kind of makes you feel like they're just stuck being kids in a haunted house.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Like,
Like
even
they're
though
growing up, they're in different situations.
Right. Like even though they got out, they didn't really.
Yeah.
And they're always, no matter what, at the end of the day, they're back in Hill House.
Yeah.
Always reliving these traumatic experiences again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's like a main thing, not just for Nellie, but like overall with all of the characters, they are haunting themselves
over and over again.
in some way. It's just whether it's as children or as adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
But either way, like in one circumstance or the other, every character is haunting themselves.
Yeah. None in as chilling way as Nellie, though, because she is haunted
she
literally
is,
by
she is
the
haunting
ghost of herself
as a kid.
Freshly dead.
Yeah.
Neck snapped. It's like, okay, we can be metaphorical, but also, what the hell? You know?
Like, jeez.
Like, you can calm down a little bit. She's 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just,
I guess that's
chilling.
the point.
Yeah. And that is the fun of it, too, because, like we were saying earlier, it's fun to have the ghosts, but also the meat. And on the flip side, it's fun to have the meat, but also at the same time, like, it's ghosts. You know, it is ghosts. It is just scary.
Yeah.
And that's all it can be, because that's all it was to a 6-year-old kid, you know?
Yeah.
It almost is, like, cathartic in a way that you get to be so scared over something. It, like, almost vindicates your own experiences as a scared child to say, well, she was right, you know?
Yeah.
I could have been
right. Like, that was scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was real. That was real.
Yeah. And whether or not, like, thinking back on your own childhood, like, even if you weren't actually haunted by actual ghosts from your future, there is some level of, like, it was at least really scary.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't a real, like, supernatural event.
Which is part of the problem that she has with Steve, and Shirley as well, is that they just don't believe her. And they don't give her that vindication at all. Even just to say, that must have been really scary. You know, Luke has that moment a little bit when he gets stuck in the dumbwaiter and he's downstairs and his parents are like, oh, that must have been so scary. But they think it was just because he was stuck. They don't know that when he was stuck, he was like, okay, this is a little freaky. I'm cool, though. He didn't start screaming and freaking out until after the, like, zombie man
he
crawled
like,
slowly towards him on the floor.
And the lights are flickering, so he can't quite tell how close the guy's getting, and then he comes up and his shirt's ripped. Like, he was almost grabbed and pulled into the basement.
Yeah.
That's so scary, right? And, like, Theo believes him, because she was there with him, but the parents, because they weren't there and they didn't have that experience, it is just, like, the comfort that you give to a child that must have been so scary, but they just don't have context for that there actually was a creature in the basement.
Yeah. And that's the perfect example of Mike's, like, long shots, not just jump scares, you know, because you know something's coming. You know when she hits the up button and it goes down instead, you know, like, okay, here we go. I'm like, buckle up here.
Because in a real life situation, that would be the scary thing, right? That it goes the wrong way and now he's stuck in the basement. That's scary enough, like, for a real life situation. But then it's a ghost story. So you have to know that there's something else that's gonna happen.
We've been in this house long enough.
Yeah.
We know. Luke is in the basement and we're kind of focusing on it. And then all of a sudden his flashlight starts to flicker and you go, oh no. And so he's hitting it a little bit. And then he sees in the corner a very gentle layout onto the ground. And this is what we're saying, is like, he's not fast. It's not like a quick, like, boo, there's a guy there, you know. It's that's a hand,
that's a hand,
and that's moving.
Yeah.
But no one's been down here for decades, so if it's a pony, it must be dead, right, Shirley? And then you see his face kind of crawl out from behind the box, and then he starts to speed up. But it's not until after you have the tension
of, like, I think there's something in here,
point.
and then I know there's something in here, and then there's something in here, and it's moving at me, and it can see me.
Yes,
and
it's getting faster.
And it's getting faster.
Yeah, that's where like that build up, because you have to be much more patient, and it's the same thing with his monologues that he does. Mike Flanagan loves his monologues, and he does them very well. There are a couple times that they get long for me, I'm gonna admit. Yeah. Especially in Midnight Mass. There are a couple that I'm like...
There's a couple that they just keep talking.
I'm like, oh my hell.
Like,
let's go. And this is because I am an impatient person, and I can't wait for my turn
And they're
to
not
talk.
playing Subway Surfers.
They're not playing Subway Surfers. Mike, come on! Put a Sudoku in the corner for me. But it is, when I can be patient with it, and when it doesn't go on for like 12 minutes, the payoff, if you take the time to be patient and to build it up carefully, thoughtfully, that's when the payoff becomes insane. Because yeah, a jump scare will get you for a second, but that haunting moment of, I thought I saw something in the corner of my eye, I did see something in the corner of my eye, but I'm not even seeing it can see me.
Yeah.
But I'm also not even seeing the thing in the other corner of my eye that's just behind me. So you know, what is there? And then the long monologues, like, it's, the patience creates so much more payoff than it would if he just leaned into like the fast cuts or like the quick explanations of the characters just kind of saying whatever quickly. You know, we've got to get through this. And that, I think, has a lot to do with the format, that it's not a movie, it's a TV show. We can space it out. We can have time to focus one episode on each sibling.
Yeah.
We know the story back to front. We know it so well, so intimately, and that just wouldn't be as fun in a movie form, because you have to be punchy. And a movie form works really well for some like horror stories like Nope or Us, which are, again, truly horrifying.
You're able to get really deep with it, but you don't have to know like the last 25 years of history for each character. Like, you can jump ahead to like, oh, now she's an adult.
Yeah.
And you don't really know what happened at the fair that day, you know?
Yeah.
It's a different format, but I think having the TV format works really well for adapting this book, and they can really take their time with like developing your understanding of the characters.
Mike Flanagan is a really talented director with horror, because he knows how to build up to things, he knows how to build the tension, and he knows how to make an already terrifying situation much scarier just by like tiny details. And the camera shots as well are incredible, because he doesn't rely on the stereotypical horror genre like tropes. Genre.
Right.
Horror
course.
genre, genre, if you will.
I want.
But like, he doesn't rely on the quick jump scare shots. Like, there are a couple things that are quick cuts and very sudden, especially in the first episode, that make you jump a little bit, but it's not,
that's not all there is.
Yeah, he knows how to make it painfully slow. You said yesterday that you have to live in each moment that the characters are living in. Like, you have to wait it out with them, and that just makes it that much more terrifying, because you don't even have the promise of relief from a jump scare. You can't say, oh, it's going to be one little like boo and then it's over and then I'll be okay.
Right.
I won't be, probably. It's coming for me, and there's nothing I can do to stop it or slow it down.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. That's something that I especially noticed in episode 4, when it's from Luke's perspective, and he hears, something in the hallway, like, kind of tapping. Yeah. And so he goes up, he stands up. Crickets stop chirping.
Come on.
Yeah, shout out to the sound design and the people who did the subtitles and had to write in bracket crickets stop chirping.
Yeah.
Because that's terrifying. Anyway, yeah, he gets out of bed and he walks up to the door, and like behind him on the wall, you see like a shadow, a person-shaped shadow, like slowly moving. And it's not his, but you also like haven't been shown anybody else in the room because he hasn't opened the door yet. And just little things like that you're like, nobody else is seeing this. Like, none of these characters are seeing the like faces in the corner and the shadows moving on the wall that don't belong to them.
No.
But when you're watching it, you can see it. So then you're like,
hello?
This is totally terrifying. Like, this poor little 6-year-old kid is hearing noises in the night, and there's actual shadows in his room. Like, as if there's somebody in there, but then there's nobody there.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the ghost outside who's coming into the room, because Luke has a hat that belonged to this ghost. So the ghost is going through the house trying to find it. He eventually does. But there's that sense of terror because, like, okay, yeah, there's the ghost outside the room, but what are you gonna do about the one, bestie, the call's coming from inside the house, you know? And it's brilliant because he does this in every episode. And we were talking about this yesterday when we were watching through the episodes. Like, it's fun to have, especially rewatching it, you know, it's fun to point out, like, all the little ghosts you missed the first time. Or, like, oh, look, there's hands in the corner, or there's a, you know, a person, like, standing right behind them.
Yeah. Like a full guy.
Yeah, not even, like, a glimpse or a, you know, someone walking through and passing. That's a, like, they linger on it. They don't draw attention to it. Like, the camera doesn't, you know, intentionally, like, psst, are you seeing this? But it's just present enough in the background. Like, it's there for a couple shots, maybe even a whole scene, and then it's gone. And so you know for a fact, okay, I wasn't imagining things. That didn't just look like a person. That was a ghost in the corner. Because I know that it's now
it's
gone.
Consistent.
Yeah.
You see it, like, it's there long enough for you to maybe notice it. Or when it's not there anymore, you
think,
then
oh,
you think
no.
you notice it because you're like, wait, wasn't there something there before? Like, just these little contrasts in what you're seeing and what you're not seeing.
Yeah. Or just, like, hands under the piano, or a face in the ladder.
So creepy.
So as a viewer, it makes it really fun to spot. But also, yeah, there's that sense of, like, oh no!
Like, they have no idea the danger that they're in. That's what you said yesterday. Like, they have some sense of, like, there's something off about this house, but they don't really know. But then when you're watching, you see all these, like, ghosts and creepy hands with fingers that are too long, and faces and shadows without bodies, and you're like, these people are, like, in imminent danger. Like, there's something so deeply wrong here.
Come on!
And nobody notices. Even, like, Theo, who's sensitive to it, like, she finds the trapdoor and looks down the ladder, and there's literally a guy's face right there,
looking into the camera,
looking at her. It's like, and she looks down the ladder and doesn't see it,
and still goes down into it.
Yeah, which
by
is
the way,
insane.
come on, like, no wonder this
And
family's
it's like
haunted.
she's proving a point, I guess, and she's only like 10, but still, bad idea.
Thinnest device. Yeah,
can only give them a pass because they're children. But
That's
the parents, on the other hand, and the freaking Dudleys, no sir.
Okay, listen, the Dudleys. I love a good character who is aware of what's going on. I love that, but also why, like, they just let this family with children move in, and they were like,
and they say all this, like, weird cryptic stuff, like, oh, we never stay after dark. And you're like, okay, weird. Why are my 6-year-olds staying here after dark then? Like,
yes, come on.
So insane.
Yeah. Going back to the cricket thing.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because we hear in one episode that there's dogs barking on the property. And we never really get any resolution on that. But it's, you know, they're around the house, but they're never in the house. And it's interesting that the crickets stop chirping. Like, it implies that this house or something in it is more powerful than nature itself, which is a terrifying concept, that Mother Nature herself would bend at the will of Hill House.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure, whatever, that's fine, that's normal.
Oh, also the kittens die inside the house.
The kittens die inside the house because they get a disease and nobody knows what it is.
Going
They're
back
so
to
spooky.
They are like intentionally so creepy to these kids.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you can tell that they're scared and they're trying to help in their own weird little way. But, like, there's a scene in the 5th episode with Mrs. Dudley, and she's talking to Nellie, and Nellie has a fragile little teacup covered in stars. And she's like, I probably shouldn't use this because I might break it. And Mrs. Dudley grabs her by the arms and says, insist on your cup of stars. They'll try to beat it out of you.
Yeah. Once you become just like everybody else, you'll never have a cup of stars again. It's so intense.
And again, she's 6. And for
found
what?
A little teacup, and she's just like, I'm not supposed to have fragile things because sometimes I'm not careful. Which is actually a very self-aware thing for a 6-year-old to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what's her deal? Mrs. Dudley is so scary.
And she's like weirdly strict with some of them, but then some of the kids, it's like situations like that where it's like,
She's
You
trying to
go,
inspire
baby.
them to revolt.
Yeah. Like, come on.
She's like, Steve, you need religion.
Have you heard of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ?
And he's like, of course I have. What's your problem? She's so weird. Yeah, she's
She
like
is.
evangelizing to just Steve.
Mm-hmm.
Weird stuff.
Yeah. So each episode, like Olivia said, focuses on one of the siblings and like their childhood and their own experiences in the house, and then as an adult, they're 24 like hours on this last day before Nellie dies, and it's the setup of those 5 episodes as well is so fantastic because you go backwards in age. You start with Steve, the oldest, and then you work backwards to Nellie herself. So for most of you're introduced to this in the very first episode, but you don't know really what happened until episode 5 on that day, which is so fun because they give you just enough information about the house and the other siblings that you think, oh, okay, I'm not really worried about that. But then there are other things that happen with the other siblings that keep you like attentive enough. Do you see what I'm saying? It gives you enough information that you're not like sitting there waiting for 5 episodes for like, oh my gosh, anything at all. Like,
because
come
anything
on.
gonna happen? Why do we just keep doing the same 24 hours?
Yeah.
But it's enough like context for each episode that you like have to watch all of it in order to fully understand what's going on with Nellie. But you also know like none of these characters are sympathetic.
No.
All of her older siblings are like so rude, so dismissive of her when she's clearly like really struggling with something that's real.
Yeah.
And then like you finally get to the last episode and it's like finally from Nellie's perspective and she's like the only nice person in their entire family.
So hard.
She tries so hard. She asks all of her siblings for help. She's going to a doctor, like she's really doing what she can, but then her siblings like she'll do something that is maybe a little bit out of line because she's very deeply angry and upset because there's something wrong and nobody's listening to her.
And her husband died right in front of her.
And they just
recently.
are like, they're like, why are you being so annoying? Like, what's your problem? Like, you know what her problem is.
It's not a mystery.
She's in deep grief and she has PTSD from growing up in a haunted house as a kid, just like you. Like, pay attention to these signs.
Open
like,
your eyes.
all of these people should know what's going on with her and how to help her.
Yeah.
But they don't, and so you just get like so frustrated and you feel so sad for Nellie. Episode 5 is like so emotional.
It really is.
Because you're like, she's the only one that like is feel like she's the most sympathetic character.
Yeah.
Because you see how much she's trying and how she's just like so deeply sad and she just wants any of her siblings to actually listen to her.
Yeah.
And that's all she's ever wanted. And the only time she gets it is when she's back in the haunted house and she has like a hallucination of her siblings apologizing and saying, you were always right, we always should have listened to you.
And you can tell after like the whole episode where she's just gone through so much, that's the only time probably in her entire adult life that she's had just complete resolution for everything. You know, she has her husband there again, who she's missed desperately. She has all of her siblings there, Luke included. Every problem that she's ever had, her parents are there.
Her parents are
like,
there.
Everything is perfect and right just for a moment, and then it all comes crashing down again. And it is really emotional. It's devastating
it's, like,
because
so heartbreaking.
it is. Well, you've spent this whole episode with her too. The first 20 minutes of her as an adult falling in love and finally being happy and figuring out her sleep paralysis, which is a separate thing from her hauntings,
Right.
which is fun.
Like,
I like
she has
that.
real medical problems and she also has real like problems with haunting, and so it's interesting because like a lot of doctors will just treat these certain things and then chalk the rest up to side effects.
Yeah.
Like, these are symptoms or these are hallucinations because of your other stuff.
Yeah.
And so
Which
it's hard
does
to
make
know
sense,
that like
but
in a real situation, like that's what everybody would assume.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of like evidence that haunted houses really exist.
Right.
You know, and nobody's gonna understand her. it's so interesting that like balance of like she actually does need this treatment. Like she does have anxiety and she does have sleep paralysis and she needs her medication, but there is also something else going on that her doctor doesn't understand.
Yeah.
There's an interesting balance there.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And it's cool because for the first couple episodes, especially with Steve claims he's never seen a ghost, and we go through the first episode without really seeing much like evidence from an audience perspective that you don't think could be attributed to like, oh, they're kids being kids. It's like, you know, we don't start out, I mean, you have the bent neck lady, and we go into it knowing that this house is haunted for sure, but it's
But
fun
you
to
don't
get,
see a lot when you're in Steve's episode.
exactly, or even Shirley's, and then we start to get into Theo's, and it's like, okay, like with
And
every
you start
sibling,
to see a
it
lot
gets
of faces because Theo's really
it's
sensitive to it.
She's so, there's more
Yeah.
faces in that episode than I think any other, and it's like with each sibling you go back, and with each one they had more experiences in the house. They had more like deep, real, genuine trauma from these hauntings that people they disregard. They don't believe them. They think it's just imagination or like, you know, made up friends or whatever. And these kids are like, this is deeply terrifying to me, and no one's listening to them. But because they're 6 years old, they don't trust them. But if they were any older, no one would like they would stop believing. You know, it's like Steve doesn't look for it. It's like the younger ones are the most vulnerable, and so they're the ones who are targeted the most. And so the older ones don't believe them because they're not really experiencing it either. So with the audience, you get more and more entrenched in the haunting of the house because you're going back in time with or back in age with the kids. So you start out with like 13-year-old Steve, who's like whatever, but then by the time you get to Nellie and Luke, you're like,
They're like, this is real. Like, it feels like a real issue.
yeah, like that scene with Luke hiding under the bed.
Yeah.
They're
young enough to not have all these like justifications, you know. They still believe in Santa Claus kind of thing.
Right.
Like a 6-year-old is way more likely than a 13-year-old to still fully believe in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny and whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So it makes more sense that they like like you say, they can more clearly understand what's actually happening, but they are less likely to be listened to because it can be chalked up to an imaginary friend or whatever.
Right, yeah. This is a theory that I've come up with myself. No one else has talked about online or, you know, discussed, that the siblings represent the 5 stages of grief.
Yeah. Really? I've never heard that before.
I know, it's totally, like, original to me.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I know.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. Actually, I think it's a Reddit thread, but
probably,
yeah. It is a fascinating theory, and I love watching it as like their kids and then growing into dysfunctional adults. They're all, like you said, terrible, non-sympathetic people.
Yeah.
And that's because they've had very deep, very real trauma.
Yeah.
So it's explainable, not justified, especially when it comes to Nellie, who's desperately trying to get some kind of help, and maybe also lashing out in the not the most healthy way, but also what else can she do?
What else is she gonna do?
She's tried everything else.
Like, she goes to the book reading, right? And obviously, like, she feels like she's been ignored by Steve. So she's like, this is the only way to confront him, right? And maybe she's wrong about that, but he's also wrong in his reaction of saying, like, this is really unprofessional, you can't bother me at work. Instead of seeing, like, this is my little sister who's grieving the loss of her husband.
Yeah.
And she's angry with me. And he's like, oh, why did you wait 6 years to say this? Like, there's no, like, exact timeline for this. She's allowed to be angry.
And process things at her own time.
And maybe she didn't think it was a big deal, and then all of this trauma is coming back because of the death of her husband.
Yeah.
So now she's mad at you.
It makes
like, you
sense.
could be like, why is it taking 6 years? Maybe there's something wrong with my sister, and she came to me for help. And she's reaching out in anger because that's the only thing she can do right now.
Yeah.
Like, they just have no compassion for each other.
No, none at all.
Even though, like, like, this is the person who should understand. It's her
big
brother.
who he has shown as a child to be a really good big brother.
Yeah.
He takes care of his younger siblings. He goes to hang out with Luke in his treehouse, and he's so thrilled to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not like an older brother, like, fine, you know, like Shirley's, okay, let's go play outside, whatever. I don't want to have a tea party.
But Luke says, will you hang out with me? And Steve says, you really want me to?
That's the sweetest thing. He used to be such a good brother and so caring, so you know he has the capacity for it.
Yeah.
But it is frustrating that he's gotten
hardened.
so blind to it. And it's got to be cutting when Nellie points out his very real hypocrisy, and like she says, you say the meanest things to me. And I love that line, because it's just, it's kind of immature.
Yeah.
In a way. It's like she's going back to being a child a little bit, and like it's not very eloquent. It's just, you say the meanest things to me.
Yeah.
And it's just,
but I think
it's so real.
It cuts so deep because it's not eloquent.
It's
and
raw,
it does sound
and
like a kid sister.
Yeah. Like, why are you so mean to me? Why do you treat me this way?
Yeah.
And you know, it's, maybe he would have taken it better if she'd taken the time to, you know, get him to a private place and all this stuff. But, you know, you can talk about what ifs all day long.
Yeah.
But really it comes down to, she was right about that. And he could not handle
couldn't handle it.
That he was cruel to her and is then profiting off of that trauma that she experienced and the cruelty that he dished out to her.
Yeah.
At the very least, he could say, I know this was real to you, you know?
Yeah, like, even if he doesn't have to believe it necessarily, to just, like, believe that she believes it.
Yeah.
Like, how hard is that?
Come on, Steve. Oh, yeah, stages of grief.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about grief.
Hell yeah! I'm looking forward to this one.
Everyone's favorite topic.
Oh, it's great. It's 5 stages. There's 5 stages. 5 siblings, incidentally.
How interesting.
Yes. Steve obviously represents denial. You know, he doesn't believe anything that he's seen. He rationalizes everything. You know, for a lot of things, maybe there is a rational explanation for it. He says a lot of times a ghost is a wish. And that's
it's a very poetic thing for him to say.
Yeah. Like, he's like, I've wanted ghosts to be real because I've wanted to have some explanation for this. I've wanted to have a reason. And there isn't any. None that I've seen. None that makes sense. So it's, you know, not real. I don't believe in ghosts. I didn't see any ghosts. We have Shirley, who is angry. She's so angry at everything, about everything, all the time.
Yeah.
And she keeps it so bottled up inside herself. She's angry at herself. She's angry at, like, her husband, at Nellie, at Steve, at Luke, at her dad, everything. There's nothing but anger, and there's no way out for her. It's just anger. You know, Theo's depression, she gets, like, blocked off. She doesn't feel anything at her worst, at her darkest. There's no connection there. Luke is bargaining. He's trying to get himself out of the trauma by trading it in for an addiction, and neither works. So now he has trauma and an addiction.
Right.
And Nellie's the only one who fully accepts what happened, knowing that it was, you know, traumatic, and then able to go back to the house. And, you know, as later on in the show we see the resolution to it, but like each sibling just so fully encapsulates that one specific emotion, and then that it works really well with the rest of their personalities, because it's not only these things, but it's just an additional layer on top of the characters that makes it so interesting to read into. I've always liked that theory that I did not read online, that I made up myself. I think it's fascinating, even if it wasn't intentional, which I feel like it was, because Mike, he knows what he's doing. I'll say that. Yeah. But the other thing that we had talked about last night as we were watching this was that they could also represent, like, the 5 senses. Nellie, when they first get to the house, she says, it's so loud. That's the word she chose. Theo's obviously touch. I think, I was thinking about this yesterday, I think Luke is taste. I think he. Oh, but we were talking about, because he has a couple lines in each of the episodes where he says it smells in here. What's that smell?
Yeah.
Like all these things.
What's that smell?
See, this is new, and this genuinely does come from us. So we haven't workshopped it all the way yet, but we think there's something important there.
We were talking about him being smell because they go into the room where Hazel like died,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "Oh, why does it smell in here?" And Theo's like, "It smells the same as the rest of the house."
Mm-hmm.
Which is either that she doesn't notice the difference in smell, or that she's still just so sensitive to the ghosts that she can just smell them everywhere, right? But either way, it's interesting that Luke picks up on that.
Yeah.
And then you talked about Shirley being taste just because she always sees things crawling out of mouths.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's gross.
And then Steve, ironically enough, is sight, because he's the only...
Because he didn't see any ghosts.
He didn't see any ghosts.
He didn't see anything.
But he's the only one who, like, did see them, just in plain sight, and, like, just acknowledged that they were there.
And he
kind
just
of
didn't
moved
know
on.
that they
He
were
didn't
ghosts.
notice that they were ghosts,
And
but
then
he
it's-
sees them so clearly and is so, like, aware of them that it's just, he can't even be afraid, because it's just so normal. That,
Right.
of course,
He just thinks that's a guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And then also, like, when he's the last kid to leave the house,
Mm-hmm.
and Hugh says, like, I'll carry you, just
Nice.
don't look.
Oh my gosh.
So
Why
that's
are we
interesting.
so, like, incredible? We're masters of media analysis.
That's true.
We're so literate. It's, like, wow.
You guys wouldn't believe the words I can read and comprehend.
So streets ahead of everybody else. Yeah. I think we'll keep an eye on this more throughout the rest of the series as well. But it was a fun thing to talk about and kind of bounce back and forth with last night of,
Yeah.
like, oh, they keep talking about.
Like, interesting. Maybe there could be something there, you know?
Yeah. And that's the fun thing about rewatching the show, is I've seen it probably 5 times, front to finish. And it's, like, I have never gotten tired of watching it, because every time I'm, you know, with the ghosts in the background, you're always looking for those, so it's always engaging. Even if you
It's
can
like
kind
if
of
they
tune
had
out of the
Subway
story a little
surfers
bit.
on
It's
this.
like they should think about doing that in the next horror show. We should get in contact with Mike Flanagan. Like, hey, look, Midnight Mass would have been pretty damn good if you'd had.
Just what if you were also playing, like, Candy Crush or something?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. This is how I watch these shows anyway. I cannot be, like, understimulated at any given moment. I have a TV show, I have a game, and I have my notes always. I can't, like, it's not just one thing. And that's my own fault. But, you know, we're here. And the least you could do to help me out is play a little bit of Candy Crush on screen, okay? It's not that big of an
Called
ask.
accessibility.
It's a fascinating show. It's
It
so
is.
good. It's genuinely... I don't like horror movies very much. Am I saying the same? No.
Cool. I was like, I don't know. I feel like half of the movies we've talked about on this
Are-
channel have been horror movies.
Yeah. And I've realized that I like them to be a very specific way. You know, like, I don't really like The Conjuring. I don't like The Exorcist. Not The Exorcist. Poltergeist. Like, those kind of movies. I don't know. They're, like, it feels like cheap horror to me. And that's not to say, like, anyone shouldn't enjoy them or whatever. They're just not for me.
Right.
But these ones where it's not just the horror, it's not just the jump scares, it's not just the ghosts. There's so much emotional meat to it.
Yeah.
It's I watch them for the ghosts, but then along the way I get caught up in Steve's failing marriage and Luke's struggle to sobriety and Theo's complete lack of self-awareness
Yeah.
and lack of...
She can help everybody except herself. And her own family.
Yeah. And it's just such a beautiful story, and then you see the resolution at the end, and the battle to get there takes so much work, but you feel like you've accomplished so much even as a viewer with these characters. Like, it's not just a horror movie. It's a story about love and grief and family and hope. Family.
Yeah.
You know, it's so substantial.
It's like, yeah,
is
like
the
it's a
word.
real story, and that's something that you said earlier, is that you don't get tired of rewatching it.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is that, like, it's not just like scary,
Yeah.
or gory or whatever, but there is like real meat to it, and there's something to focus on every time. And even if you don't go in with anything particular in mind to
Mhm.
focus on, you'll still be interested. There'll still be something that catches your attention, or that really makes you feel for the characters. It is like very emotional.
Yeah.
And that's something that we talk about with like Jordan Peele too, you know, that he's
Oh
not
my
just writing
gosh.
scary stories, but he's talking about like racial conflict and family conflict, and it's about grief and love and understanding,
Mm-hmm.
as well as being so scary.
Yeah. It almost
Like
gives you.
Us, like, genuinely is just about
So-
like confronting yourself.
I listen, and I
it's
think that's
terrifying.
probably the
I
most.
think about it constantly.
I do too. I have never in my life thought that doppelgangers would be scary until I watched that movie, and I genuinely could not sleep for a week.
Mhm.
I was like, "Holy shit! Where did I leave my scissors?" That was a genuine concern to me. It was like, "Oh my gosh, I've never been this scared in my life." Even
Yeah.
after all the ghost ones, like turning off the lights after a ghost movie, I'm like, "Ooh, whatever."
Yeah, you like
But-
see a shadow and you're like, oh, it's just a coat. I put it there. Yeah,
Like
like
but,
you do get a little freaked out
yeah, but
for like a night.
you see yourself passing in like a reflection, and to this day, I'm like, "Ah, she's here,"
Yeah.
you know.
Who are you? Get out of my house.
Which is another
Get out.
Get Out as
mhm.
another Jordan Peele movie. That was a funny reference.
Yeah.
Intentionally made.
Good. So
Haha.
good.
And so,
This does not at all interrupt our flow of communication.
no, it was not going very well anyway.
True.
We were talking about things that no matter how many times you watch it, you're still going to be interested. So we can
Yeah.
talk about any of those things
We can.
and then call it and go watch the next few episodes.
Yay! And Mike Flanagan has also done, what's the movie I'm thinking of? It's got his wife in it too. By the way, I just want to say, I mean no disrespect to Mike Flanagan whatsoever. I think he's amazing. But also, it is a little fun to look at him and what he looks like, and also to see his wife standing next to him. Love is real.
Mm-hmm.
And there you have it.
And
I
there
don't
you
know
have
what
it.
movie that is.
She's deaf and mute. It's a very scary movie. If someone in the comments knows what I'm talking about.
Shirley.
No, not Shirley. That's in this movie. I can't remember. She lives in like a glass house, and a man is coming to get her, but he's like toying with her because she's deaf and she can't hear him, and so she's like, "Guess I'll have to kill you," and she does. It's amazing. But he also directed that one, so like he can.
Yeah.
He can compact it too. You have to be a talented writer in order to compact something, and you have to be a talented writer in order to expand it out into 10 episodes of like long, sometimes painfully long monologues and shots on a face. It can get long, it can get boring sometimes, but to be persistent about it and to say, this is how I'm going to tell the story intentionally, not just not understanding when to cut. That's, I
Right.
think, what I'm driving at here.
Yeah.
Is it shows an intentional skill rather than a lack of skill, in that he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows what he's doing, and it's intentional, it's on purpose, and it creates a very specific sort of vibe for the show that you're watching. It's very well done.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I feel like part of like sitting through these long monologues, and they get kind of like tedious. It's just, I mean, that's kind of life.
Yeah.
You know, so you're just sitting there and this person like just keeps talking and you just have to listen to it, right? Or sometimes there's like something that you have to work through, and it's not going to take 1 minute. It's going to take
6 years.
6 years. So when they're giving these monologues and they're like telling their story, their experience of what happened to them, like, of course it has to take a long time because it's showing that they, as a character, are still working through it.
And on the rare occasions when everyone else around them shuts up and listens, like, it shows that they're finally, you can back off a little bit, Theo. You can shut up and think about someone other than yourself, Steve. You know, like, actually listen for once. Be quiet. don't talk, don't argue, just listen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you wanted to say about the first 5 episodes?
No, I'm very excited to talk about the Storm episode.
Yeah.
That's genuinely, I think, one of the greatest pieces of TV ever.
There you go.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that'll come up next.
Stay tuned.
Mhm. Oh, wait, real quick.
Oh yeah.
Everyone should watch the show. It's fantastic. It's so good.
Mhm.
Recommend. We talk about everything on this. Don't put it just at me, please. Everything we talk about is so good all the time, but please watch this one specifically.
Mhm.
It'll change your life. It's fantastic. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. Great.
Bye.
To sync up sound. Good idea.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine.